Dallas. I'm Amy and I lead our worship team, and I'm so happy to welcome you and that you're here with us today. All summer, we've been talking about the most exciting idea on earth, and we truly believe that being a part of building a church is the most exciting idea. So, be a part of it with us here at Dulles. If you live in the Dulles area, join us in person at Lightridge High School. Our Sunday gatherings are our favorite time of the week. And if you call Dulles your church home, invest in what we're doing here. When you give to Dulles, you're actually investing in our future. Another way you can be a part of the most exciting idea on earth is by joining us in serving our neighbors. We are partnering right now with the Dulles South Neighborhood Closet by donating gently worn clothing for their back to school clothing drive. Our last day of collecting clothing is next Sunday, so go home and clean out those closets and bring your donations with you to church. We're also encouraging you to sign up for a 1 to 2 hour shift during the clothing event itself. The event is running August 9th through 13th, and Brad and I will actually be serving along with others at Dulles. You can sign up on our app or at dulleschurch.org/serve. Dulles, I love you guys so much, and I'm so glad you're here with us.
Hey, good morning, church family, wherever you're watching from, different parts of the country, and also at Lightridge High School. If you're at Lightridge this morning, welcome, and I'm sad to not be there. We're on a road trip with Reagan for her 21st birthday, but we're continuing with this series, and throughout the pandemic, we used video more, and we do from time to time, and so I'm super happy to be talking to you from the screen this morning, and wherever you're watching from, we really consider you part of the Dulles Church family. So welcome. I have been excited about this message. I've been kind of anxious to get to this point because I really believe in today's message. We're talking about the most exciting idea on planet Earth. And before we get there, for just a couple minutes, we're going to start with some bad news. I'm going to start with bad news for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're going to quickly shift to some pretty great news. In fact, the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they used the Greek word gospel, which meant really great news for everyone. And so we're going to get to that and how it relates to the most exciting idea on earth. But we're going to start with this. For the last 30 years, and you could argue it's really been more than a generation, Americans have been leaving the church, the American church, and distrusting the church at an increasingly rapid pace. This is true of Protestant churches and the Catholic Church. It's true of virtually every denomination of Christian church in this country, and it's especially true in polls and surveys, and I certainly hear this. I've heard it anecdotally, for many, many years now, of evangelicals or the Evangelical Church. And if that word is a word that only translates as a political word, maybe that means you're newer to church or you didn't grow up in church. And it's true. The word evangelical has sadly evolved to mean a group of people of faith who practice their faith in large part through politics or through their political opinions. And that is not what the word originally meant. That's not what the word means. It comes from the original word euangelion, which is to share with great optimism and great excitement good news. That's what the word originally meant. And it's ironic that now it's associated really with political opinions. And so all of this to say, I don't blame Americans. As a pastor, I don't feel defensive or offended. I get it. Who can blame our culture when the American church has really become known for being against certain types of people or being anti-science or rules-centered? A lot of people think the church is about rules. And if your impression of Jesus is that he came to establish yet more rules, more religious rules, it actually means you don't know the story of Jesus. That's not why. He actually came to undo the religious rules. And he said he came with one rule, actually one law, only one. And that is that we would grow in love, in his love, that our faith would grow in his love, sacrificial love, that we would lay down our lives, we would give up our rights and our wants for the sake of others, that we would live our lives in love to elevate others. That's Jesus' one rule. And the American church has become known for its political passion more than Jesus' priorities and Jesus' calling. And so to sum up all the consistent polls that we read, there have been some recent ones, and just my anecdotal conversations with friends around the country, Americans, for about a generation, or maybe more than a generation, Americans have seen less and less of Jesus in the American church. Carey Nieuwhof is a very popular, all around the world, popular church leader blogger. He writes about church leadership, and pastors all over the planet read Carey. He happens to be a North Point partner, just like we are. So when I'm at lead pastor retreats, I sometimes see him. He recently wrote this. We'll put this on the screen. You can make a strong argument that America accelerated its journey to becoming a thoroughly post-Christian culture over the course of the pandemic. So much has changed since 2020, and by all accounts, about 30 to 50% of former regular church attenders simply decided not to come back. And these are people anywhere from not yet convinced, or maybe on the fringe. Maybe they were new to church, but we're seeing it in churches everywhere. It's a part of pastor conversations that, wow, people just did not return or have not returned yet. And this is just part of the post-Christian culture that America has become. All right, that's it with the bad news. We're going to shift into the really great news that's about the church that Jesus intended, that Jesus started. Remember, we're talking about being a church that looks like Jesus and sounds like him and emulates him and models him and behaves like him to the world, so much so that people are attracted to it. People find hope and meaning in the church that they're not finding anywhere else. That's the church Jesus created. And that's the most exciting, compelling idea on the planet. We really believe that. I believe it more and more as I grow in my own faith. Okay, so I mean this sincerely. I thought about this before I was going to say it today. I don't typically struggle with envy. It's I have struggles in my life. There's areas of my life certainly that God has had to work on. Envy has not really been one of them. When a friend gets a new Tesla, I don't really need a Tesla. I'm excited for the friend. I hope they take me for a ride. I just texted a friend about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had a question for him, and he texted back, "Hey, can I call you in 10 minutes? I'm on a boat in Tahiti." No kidding. That's what he said. And I was like, man, why bother? Just, call me next week. I don't need to be in Tahiti with my friend. I just want to see pictures. I want to hear about the trip. I mean, I think that's typically true in general, that I don't really struggle with envy, but there is one area that I have struggled in the area of envy for a long time, and it has to do with innovative ideas or groups, teams, companies that come up with inspiring ideas, new technologies, new ways of doing things that can better the lives of people. I so want to be at that table, or I wish I could have been in that conversation, or I could have just observed how this idea was created. So here are a couple of examples. And here's the kind of the nerd coming out of me. And some of you that I consider pseudoscientists, like Brian Rogers is a science teacher, and Holly Mossberg, and I'm sure there are others in our church family. I know I'm speaking your language here, and if you're not really into science, just stay with me on this, because these examples I think kind of make my point. So last year, I was really following closely the Perseverance Mars rover landing on Mars, and it finally happened in February a year ago, and I was excited, and my family, kind of made fun of me for, watching the NASA channel and things like that. But what a lot of people still don't know is that NASA and the Jet Propulsion Lab built a specially designed drone and attached it to the bottom of Perseverance, the Mars rover. They weren't sure this was going to fly. It's essentially like a mini helicopter. And their goal was to actually fly a drone on another planet. And it's not a spacecraft by definition, a drone is an aircraft. So this would be the first aircraft flight, controlled flight on another planet. And it happened last winter or last spring. They deployed it. The rover with its cameras was watching, and my heart was racing when they tested the first flight. And it worked. And because of Mars' gravity being so different than our gravity, they weren't sure if the propulsion, all of the speed was right. It had to be a really high-powered motor. It worked. The scientists at JPL were ecstatic. And listen to this. If I've lost you, tune back into this. This is fascinating to me. This is where I wished I could have been on the JPL team, or even just a fly on the wall. Somebody there came up with this idea, and the Smithsonian agreed. JPL came from California, Pasadena. I blended those words. Came to the Smithsonian, and they were given permission to cut a 1 by 1 inch square piece of fabric of canvas off of the Wright Flyer, the first airplane, off of the Wright brothers plane, and they put it in the drone, the Mars drone. And so when the Mars drone flew, and it's still flying on Mars, a piece of the first airplane, the Wright brothers airplane, is flying on Mars in this drone. And I just think it's fascinating, and I get a little bit envious, like, oh, I would love to be in that room, or I'd love to overhear those creative conversations. All right, another quick example. For 30 years or more, I've sort of wished, it's been sort of my secret wish to be a Disney Imagineer. And maybe someday I'll be able to be in a room for 10 minutes and watch how the Imagineers work. It's just fascinating stuff. I think they might have the coolest job in the world. Whoever came up with the idea of turning Cinderella Castle into a movie screen, I mean, that has got to be one of the coolest outdoor shows of any kind in the world. It's not just fireworks, but it's really compelling movie images on the castle at night during the show, and I love it. And just a couple years ago, they tried turning the Epcot ball, Spaceship Earth, into the Death Star, and it worked. When they light it a certain way and they shoot a laser out of it, it looks just like the Death Star. I love these concepts and ideas, and it makes me a little envious, to be in these kinds of creative meetings, or wish I could be. All right, so all of that is to set this up. There is nothing I envy more or find more compelling than being part of the movement that Jesus created, that he intended. Certainly humans and church leaders in history have messed this up and gone way off the rails, but the church that Jesus intended, there's nothing more exciting to me than to be part of that church. So this is what I want to unpack with you, is that I believe the church was given access to, and we're to share with others, the most exciting, the greatest product on the planet. Now, when you think about the Teslas and the Googles and the Disneys and the JPLs of the world and university campuses and the world of medicine, so much of the innovation and technology that I find and remember, I'm not criticizing, I'm not putting down that world at all. I wish I was a part of it more. But we've got to remember, those ideas and those technologies, those innovations are often about bettering the external lives of people or inspiring people. I love it. I love inspiring people. I hope I'm inspiring. I hope this message is inspiring. But what Jesus embedded into the church was something that transcends all of that. It's an internal change. It's a change from the inside of the human condition, where anxieties, regrets, uncertainties, dead things, broken stuff of life can be turned into new and beautiful and second chances and good. And this is not only what Jesus came to do, it's what he offers the church. This is what the church is supposed to be on this planet. And another way of saying this is resurrection. This is what Jesus' resurrection is all about. Jesus took onto the cross dead things, anxieties, bullying, having been a bully, hurts, loss, the guilt of selfish decisions, a life of elevating ourselves, or maybe a character trait that the people close to you don't respect. He took all of that ugly and death of what was supposed to be fully alive in us. He took all of that on the cross. And the attachments, those things that keep lingering, that continue to make us feel guilty, those things that continue to remind us of that decision we made, or that continue to feed the fear or depression in us, he took the attachments to those things on the cross. And when Jesus came out of the tomb, he didn't just come back to life. It was the end of the power of death. When somebody comes out of the tomb after 3 days, they have power, a different kind of power, a different kind of innovation. And Jesus offers this to the church, and it's actually supposed to be what defines you and me, the people of the church. Broken marriages, selfish decisions, lost friendships, bad parenting, fears, mistakes, promoting self instead of promoting or elevating others. Character issues that we try to keep secret or we try to hide. God offers to renew our pain and ugly into something beautiful and whole. And he doesn't just give this gift to us for us. He gives this gift to us to also share and extend to others. So we're going to look at my favorite letter by the Apostle Paul. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament, a lot of different letters to different churches and church leaders. The letter that he wrote to the Ephesian church at Ephesus is, I think, my favorite. I go back and forth on this a few times, some when I'm just considering my favorite parts of Scripture. In the first chapter of Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, he describes in the first chapter God's plan to unite and bring together the perfect world of God, God's perfect dwelling and presence with human broken presence and reality. God intended to put those worlds back together in Jesus, through Jesus. And currently, right now on earth before Jesus returns, this all happens through his church, through the people of his church. So we're going to jump into this. Follow along. If you're not in Lightridge High School, but you're watching on vacation or on the road or from home somewhere, stay focused on this. We're going to get into some of the words of Paul here, but this is life-changing. It's worldview-changing. And it should motivate you the way it's motivated and inspired me to be part of, to not just attend, but to be part of building the most exciting idea on earth, which is the church. Okay, Paul said, "This is why when I heard of the faith in the Lord Jesus that is present in your community is a version, it's synonymous with the body of Christ or the family of God, the temple or the house of God." All of these phrases of Paul mean the church. He's talking to the people who followed Jesus in Ephesus. Here he says, the faith in Jesus that's present in your community. Now, we're going to read the word church. Paul's actually going to use the word ekklesia, the Greek word that Jesus used, that we translate as church. We're going to read that in just a minute, but there's something important to understand about this. Jesus used, the word that he used was ekklesia. That was the Greek word. I'm going to build my church. And then Paul teaches on the church, and we're about to read that word here in just a moment. And the church's description, when the church was described for the first 300 years in church history and in the New Testament, it's interesting that never is a church building referred to. There's no such thing as a sanctuary or a place that people traveled to go to church. Church was the people. It was always the context of ekklesia, the word that Jesus used and that Paul used. The only reference to a place where people gathered, where the church gathered, were people's homes. Jesus and Paul, the apostles in the New Testament, referred to churches that met at her home or in his home or in their home. So this is significant. Please stay with me, because we have adopted the word. In fact, the English word church, when the English Bible was translated, it was the German translation of the Bible that was used, the German word Kirche. Kirche, or church in English, actually refers more to a location or a building or a time of the week, like Sunday morning at 10 a.m. That's church. This doesn't mean the Bible is translated wrong or incorrectly. This is just a translation issue from one language to another. It's like trying to translate Shakespeare into 70 or 80 different languages. Some languages are just going to not have the words to convey what Shakespeare was saying in English. And so you do the best with the words in that language. Well, in English, in the English Bible, we ended up with the word church when what Jesus meant was not a location, not a building, not Sunday morning at 10 a.m., but the people. Specifically, the word that Jesus used and the word that Paul is about to use here is a collection of people who are united around a common unity, a shared passion, or a shared experience, so much so that they become a movement. Ecclesia, the original word for church, when Jesus said, I'm going to start my church, I'm going to build my church, he was talking about a collection of people who were passionate about a shared experience, so much so that they become a movement that changes things in the world, and it influences culture. All right, so with all that said, we're going to continue here. Paul says, when I pray for you, meaning his church, his community, this is what I say, Father, give them minds ready to receive wisdom and revelation, so that they may see things people can't normally see, because they are coming to truly know you. What are the things that God wants us to see that other people can't see? Isn't this interesting language? Paul is praying that you and I, the people of the church, would see things from God. We would have wisdom and understanding that other people don't have. Well, what are these things? Verse 18. Open the eyes, this is Paul's prayer, open the eyes of their hearts, meaning the people of the church, and let the light of your truth flood in. Open our eyes to what? Let's continue. Shine your light on the hope you are calling them to embrace. So this is a calling that Jesus is asking us to say yes to. He's asking us to embrace. The word is actually embrace. Reveal to them the wealth and glory of the inheritance you've prepared for them. So what's this calling, or what's this windfall, this inheritance that God has prepared for us? Continues in verse 19. God, let them see, Father, let them see the full extent of your power that is at work in those of us who believe, and may it be done according to your might and power. Okay, wow, so what is the full extent of his power in us? There's now what's being explained here is that there's some kind of power made accessible to the people of God's church, not a church that's judging others, or a church that's competing against others, or is politically driven, or is divisive. Not that church throughout church history, but the church that Jesus created. There's a power given to us. What is the full extent of this power? This is it. Friends, Paul says, it is the same might and resurrection power that he used, the Father used in the Anointed One, in Jesus, to raise him from the dead and to position him at the Father's right hand. There is nothing over Jesus now. When you come back from the dead, when you have power over death, you have all power. You hold power to all life, to making things whole and new, no matter the pain, no matter the mistake or the awful decision. This person, the person who can come out of the tomb after 3 days, holds all power over all powers. And Paul's saying that here. There is nothing over him. He's above all rule, all authority, every leader, and every power, over every name invoked, over every title bestowed in this age and the next. God has placed all things beneath the feet of Jesus and anointed him as the head over all things for his church. This is interesting that we are being linked with the power of Jesus to turn dead things into life, or to undo ugly or broken things. This is the last statement here. This church is his body, meaning in this world, Jesus is coming back again someday, but in this world, his body, the movement of Jesus, his voice and compassion and love and his power, this church is his body, is that movement, the fullness of the one who fills all in all, the one who fills all things with life, all life, whole life. He is modeled and emulated and lived out through the people of his church. This is a lot. This is a lot to take in. But Paul's revealing God's purpose for his church. In this current life, right now, before Jesus returns, the church is supposed to be the fullness of Jesus' power. And what he's saying is that his church is to live out in the world life or resurrection from the dead, life out of dead and broken things. To me, there's just nothing more compelling than the guilt or the fear that's held you back, or the mistakes or regrets, the broken relationships, the broken marriage, the lost friendships, or just lost, that God can undo anything and everything by his power. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead should be at work through his church. Not just in you and me, changing the dead things and old things in us, but that we can actually live out our lives in a way that people notice and people crave what we have. And they crave our story and they're drawn to what's happened to us. All right, here's an example. In the next chapter, and I'm just going to hit this briefly, in chapter 2, Paul's talking about how divided people can be. This is so relevant for us today. I mean, America has never been more divided. I mean, maybe leading up to the Civil War, and you could argue during the Civil Rights Movement, of course, but I mean, for our life, in our lifetimes, we've never seen our country so divided. Paul starts addressing the power of Jesus alive in his church. Even when other people are divided, there's this beautiful unity that emerges. And when you think about Republicans and Democrats today, conservatives and liberals, you think about media and just the news this week, the poll data on how low Americans' confidence is in the news. It might be even lower than in church. It was shocking to people to see these poll numbers come out today of how few Americans trust any of our news. So when you think about let's just read this together. For it is by God's grace, this is Ephesians 2, for it is by God's grace that you've been rescued by Jesus. It wasn't you. You didn't earn this. You haven't worked hard or done anything or impressed God to earn God's grace and rescue. It's a gift. It was not our plan or our effort. It is God's gift, pure and simple. For we are the product of his hand, heaven's poetry etched on lives, created in the anointed Jesus to accomplish the good works God arranged long ago. We were supposed to, the intention of God all along from the beginning, before humans screwed everything up and tried to take control from God, the intention was that we would live out the character of God. We would live out good works that are just beautiful and compelling. And this is his intention again, beginning with the church, the people of the church. It's not that we do good works to earn God's rescue or to earn his favor. Paul just said that. No, it's the opposite. It's the other way around. God's free gift to love us and send Jesus to us is so that we could be remade and made whole again, and that the ugly and dirty or shameful could be turned into new and beautiful, so that we could be emulating life and whole life again. That's what he means by good works. Paul then starts to talk about outsiders and insiders to the church. The Jewish people saw themselves as insiders, the true people of faith, and then Gentiles were those who were non-Jews. They were outside the faith. Listen to this. Where there's so much turmoil and division in the world, Paul's describing this beautiful picture. Jesus, is the embodiment of our peace, embodied in physically on earth in the church, in you and me. He is the embodiment of our peace, sent once and for all to take down the great barrier of hatred and hostility that has divided us so that we can be one. Listen to this. This is amazing language coming here. Jesus offered his body on the sacrificial altar to bring an end to human limitations, to what separated Jews from the outside nations. His desire was to create in his body one new humanity. I love this. The church as the body of Jesus. Paul often uses that metaphor, that the church, the followers, believers in Jesus, are his body on earth. We're the actual movement in voice and message and hope and serving and love of Jesus in this world. We, his body, are one new humanity. We look different from any different kind of group or people group who think they're left out or think they're right religiously. We are this blend of Democrats and Republicans and people who've grown up poor or grew up wealthy. Our common unity now is that Jesus has made us whole. This is what we all have in common. This is our community. That Jesus is doing something inside of me and inside of you that we can't undo. He's turning something gross or shameful or regretful or a horrible habit or a fear or something that holds us back, an anxious thought or habit that he is at work to undo all of these things to make us whole and beautiful. So much so that we live this out. From the two opposing groups, thus Jesus creating peace. Effectively, the cross becomes God's means to kill off the hostility once and for all, so that he is able to reconcile them both to God in his one new body. Ephesians is Paul's letter to describe the real purpose of the church. That we are infused with this power. I mean, the word is resurrection, life from dead power. Not just for you and me, but for you and I to extend and model and share to the world around us. I just want to read something here to you that I wrote this week preparing for this message. You want to find God's activity and power on earth, like his actual reality. You find him in churches where insiders and outsiders, remember, insiders in Paul's day were the Jews and outsiders were the Gentiles, but where people of different backgrounds or different thoughts or even religious backgrounds agree that their common unity is the life and power of Jesus, powerfully turning broken and dead things from their lives into beautiful and new. God currently dwells on earth in this movement called the church, in this one new humanity. The church is the new temple where God's activity and human activity come together. I have a few quotes for you here. N.T. Wright, I'm going to give you some work to do this coming week here in just a moment. I'm going to ask you to read a book by N.T. Wright. Download it, listen to the audiobook. It's called Surprised by Hope. But here are a couple of statements that N.T. Wright, he's a theologian from Scotland. I've loved him and followed him for years. Listen to these quotes from his book, Surprised by Hope. Jesus' resurrection is the beginning of God's new project, not to snatch people away from earth to heaven, but to colonize earth with the life of heaven. Here's another example. The world could cope with a Jesus who ultimately remains a wonderful idea inside his disciples' minds and hearts. The world cannot cope with a Jesus who comes out of the tomb, who inaugurates God's new creation right in the middle of the old one. That is when he says the world can't cope, meaning the world can't ignore this. Like this is next level. If Jesus actually came out of the tomb, alive from death, then he is inaugurating heaven's life here on this broken planet. Tim Keller, a pastor in New York City and really kind of a theologian, I love his writings. He said, if Jesus rose from the dead, then you have to accept all that he said. If he didn't rise from the dead, then why worry about any of what he said? The issue on which everything hangs is not whether or not you like his teaching, but whether or not he rose from the dead. All right, so here's how we're going to wrap our time together. I have so many ideas. I think they're kind of innovative or exciting or even fun for the community. Creating a gaming event, some gaming events for gamers to come together. Like, what if Dulles Church was a part of creating something like that? That brought people together into community, and these outsiders from the church could actually see some of our story or hear some of our story. A food event. Steve Pasquale, a few years ago before the pandemic, really came up with this idea, what if our food events were food for thought events, where we're giving people thought while we eat together and we feed one another? What if we were feeding people who were hungry? What if we were coming up with concepts or ways to feed groups who are hungry? This is just something that we want to see emerge more and more. What if we had marriage and parenting workshops that were so compelling and effective in giving relief to stressed out parents? What if we take the church more and more to our area's gathering spot, our watering hole, wineries and breweries? There's more examples here. Our Super Bowl Sunday. What if every year we have a compelling conversation with an athlete who's a person of faith, but then we have this chili cook-off that we started, and it becomes a big event for the whole community. These are innovative ideas that we could call fun. We could say they're building community, they're engaging the community. But underneath all of the fun and activities and ways we want to engage is the idea that you and I are to be the movement of God's power from dead things and regrets and bad decisions and hurts into life and hope and good, not just for you and me, but also for you and I to extend to others. So this week, would you buy NT Wright, the letters N, NT, and then WRIGHT, I'm sure it'll be on the screen, his book, Surprised by Hope. It is a powerfully eye-opening look at the real purpose of the church and how it's going to change the world. And then I want to just close with these questions. And again, at the top of our mobile app, if you click our series graphic, our series logo, you'll find these questions there. 3 questions this week for you to consider as you spend time with God, as you prayerfully look over these. Have you ever asked Jesus, do you ask him regularly to work his new and beauty and his good in a part of your life that seems uncertain or broken? Do you? Is this a regular part of your conversation with him? God, work good into this. This hurts. This is painful, or this is a regret, or this guilt I can't seem to shake. God, would you make it new? In what area of your life do you want Jesus' resurrection ability, power to do more than just ensure eternity for you, but to actually change you? In what area of your life do you want Jesus' power and love to actually change and renew you? And then the last question, even in our imperfections, God wants you and me, to be part of his movement of new and hope and healing, the movement of his church. Will you ask Jesus to use his power in you so that you can model his renewal to others? That is what's going to heal our world. And you and I are called to be part of it. We're asked to be part of it. There's nothing more exciting. There's no greater privilege that I've ever heard of than being invited into the movement, to participate in the movement of Jesus Church. I love you, Dulles family. God, infuse your ability in us, not just for us, but for the sake of others, for the benefit of others, the power of your resurrection, you coming back from death, your ability now, Jesus, to turn dead things to life and to turn pain and hurt into good. Work that in us, and work it in us as part of your body in this world. We give you our lives, Jesus. We say yes to being part of your movement of the church in this world. Amen. I love you, Dulles family, and I'm already looking forward to next week.